to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimaloye in Abuja. Let's tell you that President Bola Tinubu will present the 2024 budget to the joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday. And of course, Channels Television is gathering that information, and we do know that, as we are reliably informed, that Monday, that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Attahiru, Abbas, would officially make the announcement later in the day or tomorrow, as we understand. Meanwhile, the Federal Executive Council has also approved a 2024 budget of 27.5 trillion. This followed a review of the medium-term expenditure framework earlier passed by the National Assembly, which earmarked the benchmark of exchange rate at $700 to dollar and crude oil price at $73.96 cents per barrel. Tonight, our conversation will be with Professor Attahiru Jega, a former INEC chairman. So much to talk about within this hour, about our elections, our politics, the state of our country. Are we sliding to a descent? Where are we headed as a people? How can we get out of this quagmire? The professor of political science and someone who understands our elections so very much will be speaking to us in a frank and a direct manner tonight. So stick around with me, everyone. But first, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
President Bola Tinubu has sworn in 8 new permanent secretaries recently appointed after successfully scaling the Federal Civil Services selection process. The swearing-in ceremony came up before the commencement of the Federal Executive Council meeting at the council chambers of the presidential villa. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, says the House will convene a budget town hall meeting to enable citizens contribute to the 2024 budget defense process. He spoke at a retreat organized for chairman and deputy chairman of the House of Representatives in Abuja, where the chief of staff to the president, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, who delivered a goodwill message at the event, highlighted the pressure the collapse of local government administrations is heaping on federal legislators. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Olukayode Ariwoola, has asked judges to maintain the integrity that the judiciary is known for and remain fair and firm in their judgments. The CJN was speaking at the opening of the special session of the 2023-2024 legal year and swearing in of 58 newly conferred senior advocates of Nigeria in Abuja. He adds that he expects every judicial officer to work very hard, be very honest and courteous to the litigants, witnesses and members of the bar in the discharge of all their judicial functions. Taraba State Governor Abu Kefa says his administration is working deliberately to create a developmental master plan for the state. Governor Kefa explains that he inherited no plan from his predecessor. Instead, he got a lot of challenges in virtually all sectors of the state's economy and will take one step at a time to get it right. Edo State Deputy Governor Philip Shuaibu has formally thrown his heart in the ring for the contest to succeed Governor Godwin Obaseki as governor of Edo State in the 2024 election. Mr. Shuaibu made his intentions known today in Benin City, the Edo State capital, maintaining that he plans to contest the governorship race on the platform of the People's Democratic Party. Gender Mobile Initiative, a civil society group, is urging President Bola Tinubu to assent to the Sexual Harassment in Tertiary Institutions Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Bill in order to address the increasing cases of sexual harassment in the nation's higher institutions. As part of activities to mark the 16 days of activism, the lead director of Gender Mobile Initiative, Mrs. Omomi Ogunrotimi, told a news conference in Abuja that alarming statistics reveal that 70% of female graduates from Nigerian tertiary institutions have been subjected to all forms of sexual harassment, and this is becoming an epidemic in the country. A political group under the aegis of the concerned PDP League, CPDPL, are drumming support for the leaders and members of the People's Democratic Party under the leadership of the acting national chairman, Ambassador Umar Damagun, to enable the party play its role as a vibrant opposition party in the country effectively. At a solidarity rally at the national headquarters of the party in Abuja, the leader of the group, Mr. Daboy Kiabo Warmate, says for the PDP to effectively and actively play its role constructively, there is an urgent need for all stakeholders to support the national chairman. Amidst crisis rocking some political parties, the national chairman of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, Mr. Sylvester Eze-Okinwa, has debunked claims by some persons that the party is factionalized over a leadership crisis. Mr. Eze-Okinwa told a news conference in Abuja that the leadership of the party was elected at a national convention duly monitored by the Independent National Electoral Commission in Awka, Anambra State.
For those of you who are yet not accustomed to the Monday Federal Executive Council meeting, yeah, there was one today. And after that meeting with President Bola Tinubu spearheading that meeting, there was a briefing by the Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee on the work for the last few days. It's about 90-day work. The Minister of Finance and the coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Waliadu, briefed on this and said that the committee had proposed the removal of VAT on diesel and is looking to increase the ratio of tax revenue to GDP to 18%, which is the average for Africa. He also gave an update on the $100 million financing from African Development Bank and the $15 million from the Canadian African Development Bank Climate Fund inherited from the previous administration. He says it is a concessional borrowing of around 4.2% per annum by Abia State through the federal government, where the Minister of Budget and National Planning also spoke after the FEC meeting on the budget.
Mr. President's determination to find more money to fund our priorities, today the Federal Executive Council further revised the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal policy framework. And two of the important decisions was to use an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, and also a benchmark crude oil reference price of $77.96, meaning $4 more than the earlier approval. Equally, the Federal Executive Council approved the 2024 appropriation bill and the presentation of such to the National Assembly by His Excellency, Mr. President. The bill has an aggregate expenditure of 27 trillion 500 billion. The forecast revenue is now 18.32 trillion, which is higher than the 2023 revenues, including that provided in the two supplementary budgets. Equally and commendably, the deficit is lower than that of 2023.
All right then, everyone. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we're bringing you an in-depth look at the state of the Nigerian elections, a critical cornerstone of our democracy. With the elections that we've seen, more are coming and in the all rising, we are at a crucial juncture as a people. Tonight, we have an exclusive interview with a distinguished guest, a key figure in Nigeria's electoral history, someone who has played a pivotal role in shaping the democratic landscape of our nation at a point in time when we lost hope about anything election. It was, in fact, at that time when the president had said the election which saw me come into office was fraudulent. Tonight, I'm being joined in the studio by Professor Attahiru Jega, the former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. He joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Seun. It's a great pleasure to be here.
It's good to see you, Prof.
Thank you.
I know you are cool enough after, you spent so many years after, leaving INEC, but there's a lot of lesson, and one is particularly impressed by some of your submissions, which to a large extent, those who say if we keep quiet, our nation is going to a distance that we cannot get ourselves out in a long time. So speaking up is sometimes patriotic, and it will help our nation. Tonight, I'd like you to be very frank with Nigerians. A lot of people have a huge respect for you, and the experience that you have in our electoral process will make us better. I'd like to start a conversation with an appraiser of the 2023 elections, and I'd like you to tell us, let's shut the door on ourselves tonight, Prof. Can we do that? And tell ourselves the home truth. Well, where did we get it wrong?
Thank you so very much, Shewun, once again. 2023 elections, I can summarize my perceptions about it in terms of the fact that INEC did its best under very difficult circumstances. And obviously, while in some areas, like in the use of technology, we have seen a remarkable improvement given the provisions of the 2022 Electoral Act. In other areas, particularly areas where we had seen improvement with regards to the attitude of INEC staff, that increasingly seems to be affected by what I call the recklessness of our politicians. Because our politicians, regrettably, if there is an area where not much has changed, to my mind, it is with the mindset with which most of the politicians engage with the electoral process. There are good politicians, but there are few. And the majority of them, I regret to say, are very reckless, are very desperate, and they engage with a mindset of either I win or they pull the roof down on everybody. So we have seen challenges, for example, in the area of deployment of election materials. This is an area where we really should have seen remarkable improvement. And we've also seen recklessness in terms of the way in which politicians mobilize money and go to the polling stations very brazenly and openly. In fact, in many cases, even defying the security officials to attempt to bribe voters in the electoral process. And regrettably, we all know that poverty incidences have increased, and many voters were susceptible to being bribed to cast their votes. And I think these are areas where really we need to work extra hard in order to keep on improving the integrity of our elections. Deepening democracy requires electoral integrity. And of course, electoral integrity is not sufficient, particularly in a context where politicians show desperation and recklessness in the way in which they want to win elections.
I mean, you touched on a very key nerve into all of these issues, the heart of our election. So you saw desperation with our politicians. And I imagine, what is the incentive that makes the desperation so intense? Why do they want to kill themselves and destroy the system?
Well, I think what is happening is that for many of our politicians, regrettably, they have this perception that politics is an investment. You know, you invest, and when you get into power, you have access to public treasury, and you can return your investments with tremendous profits, particularly given the fact that our governance process is bedeviled by impunity in a manner, you know, in which many politicians can steal public resources and get away easily with it. So I think that is a source of this desperation. Many of them, as we have read and have heard, would even go and take loans in banks or from loan sharks in order to use these funds to engage in politics. And obviously, they have to be very, very desperate to win. And that desperation... So that they can recoup what they have invested.
I mean, do you think that the law also had allowed them, the law is also complicit in allowing the politicians to be desperate, where the law says you can spend billions to run for an election? Isn't that legal complicity?
Well, I would say that while the law needs to be reviewed and improved upon, even in the context of the existing laws, the challenge is that there is no sanction. You know, the 2022 Electoral Act has improved penalties in terms of the use of reckless use of money in politics. But the major challenge, to my mind, is that really, there is no thorough investigation about whether people keep to the threshold as defined by law, and also the extent to which those who have breached those thresholds are penalized. So where people can do things and get away with them, no matter how good the law is, they will still have the impunity to actually break the provisions of the law. So improving the legal framework is good, and it should be done, because you need to keep on aspiring towards having, in court, a perfect legal framework for elections. But really the challenge is to ensure that there are mechanisms by which the legal provisions, even as they exist, are actually respected. And those who do not respect them must be penalized.
So the saying that money is the root of all evil is actually tried for our elections. Money is the devil in our election. Is that what you're saying?
To my mind, the attitude of our politicians is the devil, because it is that attitude and mindset that makes them now use money recklessly. So certainly, to a large extent, use of money in an unregulated manner creates tremendous problems. But what causes that is the attitude and the desperation of our politicians.
And it has destroyed and messed up the entire system.
Absolutely.
The election management body has been terribly manipulated. Money is making people go crazy. They've thrown money at the judiciary. They've thrown money virtually to every sector just because of the election, and make everyone go crazy.
No doubt about that. In particular, as I mentioned earlier on, in the context in which the economy is so bad and wages are so low, and workers, even in critical institutions such as security and even INEC, are having serious challenges, it's very, very easy for reckless politicians to either induce or threaten people in these arenas and to compromise them. So obviously, I can give you an example. I know for a fact that for the last 5 years or so, the INEC has been trying to persuade government to provide resources so that they can increase motivation for staff in terms of salary and allowances. And they've been unable to get those kinds of resources to do that. So when you have people who have been there with very poor remuneration, doing very risky job, and in a context of an economy that is so challenging, then obviously they are susceptible to either threats or actual inducement and bribery.
We've seen blatant and outright disregard for the rule of law by those who work within the electoral management body in such a way that you imagine. For example, I'm not sure I've seen such a time since 2015 and thereabout, where electoral management body officials have been fingered and identified in corruption and corrupting our electoral process as much as we've seen in recent past, to the point that a resident electoral commissioner is being even suspended during the election because of allegations of being doing the bidding of politicians, and in fact a REC going to announce a result as against the provision of the law. I mean, are you worried about the descent that the electoral management body is getting itself into in the face of this money politics?
Yes, thank you, Shoin, for bringing this up, because it's a very, very serious challenge which contributes to the undermining of the integrity of the electoral process, And if you trace the root of this problem, it all goes back to the desperation of the politicians and the way and manner in which they try to put things in place to be able to manipulate the electoral process. Recently, I had the opportunity of participating in a retreat by distinguished senators discussing electoral reforms and making recommendations. And one of the key issues I pointed out is this issue that you have raised. You know, why is it that a resident electoral commissioner can do the kind of things that we saw in Adamawa and to some extent in Sokoto? And that is because somebody who is privileged, who had the ear of the presidency, could make nominations which are not vetted properly by the Senate, which has the constitutional power to do the vetting and the screening, and they get up being appointed. And once they're appointed, then those who have ensured that they are appointed will now go and get them to do all sorts of reckless things. In Adamawa, I'm telling you, that's what has happened. You know, and in Sokoto. So I recommended, one of the things I recommend to be able to deal with this is that the Senate must be very, very serious about screening people who are nominated for appointment in these kinds of places, especially INEC. The law is very clear. Those to be nominated, whether as resident electoral commissioners or national commissioners or even the chairman of INEC, are people who are supposed to be non-partisan and people whose integrity can be vouched for. But in a situation in which somebody will look away from the fact that the person being nominated is a politician or is a member of a registered political party and can influence the appointment, and the Senate will not do a thorough or rigorous investigation about this, then you end up having these kinds of crises. So you ask whether I'm worried. I'm really worried, because we've seen recent appointments also where a number of civil society organizations have raised concerns that many people who are even registered members of certain political parties have ended up being appointed.
Some of them are even said to be staff of politicians.
Of politicians,
Recent
so
on the employment
it's a very,
of some politicians.
Terrible thing that is happening.
And nothing was done. I mean, the National Assembly members which you make is precisely the Senate. There's a lot of loss of trust from the public about their intentions and their capacity to be able to scrutinize, because the manner in which they bow and go, despite petitions before the National Assembly, and that the case has gone to court now, to say you cannot pass for someone to be in the independent National Electoral Commission, and I emphasize the independent, when one of the major provisions is it should not be a partisan person.
Absolutely.
And it goes to the heart of this whole matter. For those who think that in the manner in which the politicians are building and strategizing in our electoral or political process, they're actually building a one-party state. Do you see that happening?
No, certainly we are moving in that direction. When you have a ruling party that can do what it wants and get away with it, impervious to criticism, constructive criticisms in many respects. So certainly it's a major challenge, and there is many scholars now who analyze Nigerian politics are also beginning to speak about state capture by crooked politicians, reckless politicians. So this is really something that is happening that is regrettable, but something really that we need to address if we want to remain on the trajectory of democratic development and having elections with integrity. So I think it's commendable that many citizens groups, civil society organizations are engaging constructively and raising issues where there are evident challenges. You know, our hope is that our citizens will become more and more enlightened, because so long as we are on the trajectory of this electoral democracy, then we have to pay attention to ensuring that the electoral process has integrity and good people actually are elected through elections. But if we allow a situation in which crooked politicians capture the process, as I have said, there are many decent politicians in Nigeria. Unfortunately, the tendency seems to be in favor of the crooked ones. And that is a terrible thing to happen. And that is why many people are now talking about state capture by crooked politicians. And this is a dangerous thing that really we have to work very hard to address.
If the president, Bola Tinubu, is watching tonight and he has the power, if there are criticism about the appointment that is made, let's assume that he has been misadvised about the appointment into INEC, which is very, very sensitive, and it goes to the core of our democracy, on our well-being as a people. What do you think he should do urgently to fix what has become a problem?
I think there is no doubt that if the president who are listening, my advice would be to immediately review the appointment of the resident electoral commissioners that was passed by the Senate recently. It's very, very important, because clearly not only does it send a wrong signal about the government's intention to improve the integrity of elections, it also suggests, that there is indifference with regards to protecting the independence and the impartiality of the election management body. I would want to believe that Mr. President was either misinformed or is not really furnished with all the necessary details with regards to these appointments. So that is the first recommendation I will make. Review those appointments. It's not too late to, if it is established that people are very partisan, who are appointed are very partisan or registered members of political parties, contrary to the legal provisions, the right thing should be done and corrections should be made. Secondly, moving into the future, the Senate itself needs to be up and doing. The normal thing when these kinds of recommendations are made is to send it to the committee, which would have the time to do a thorough review of the details of all the people that are appointed before it comes to plenary. But in this particular case, from everything we have heard and read, it appears that the matter did not go to committee, it just went to the floor of the Senate and they rushed the approval. So even with the best of intentions, there is a faulty process, and it is that faulty process that is now resulting in inappropriate people being appointed into these kinds of positions.
And I don't want to make life difficult for you tonight or put you rather on a very...
Sorry, Sharon, you can't.
Even with 100 rupees, you may not... I mean, jokes apart, Prof, and I'd like to ask you a very frank question right here. I mean, you conducted elections that a lot of people, even the international community, have given you a thumbs up. 2023 election, would you say that election was credible?
I will say that in many substantial aspects, it was credible. In areas there where we have seen serious challenges that are unavoidable and should have been avoided, I believe that to a large extent, and you asked me to be very, very frank with you. I think we have a tendency to heap blame on the leadership of an electoral management body, and I have had my own fair share of those kinds of blames, but we should apportion blames appropriately. If you check a lot of the areas where you have very, very serious challenges, there are areas where the politicians directly have influence, which more or less circumscribed the powers of the commission, of the National Commission and the chairman. So to my mind, really, it's unfortunate it has happened in the watch of Yakubu Mahmoud, but it has happened not because, to my mind, I have no evidence that he is complicit in these things. And I'm not defending him, I'm not speaking for him. But from what I know, a lot of these challenges that have undermined the integrity of the electoral process are traceable to some reckless politicians who are bypassing the commission and reaching out directly to some compromised staff of INEC who are doing all these things. And unfortunately, the poor chairman and the commission will have to take blame for it.
And there are those who will say that that election of this year took us backwards. Do you think so?
No,
from the development and the progress that we've made?
We have not reversed. There were challenges, but there is no reversal. And I think it's very, very important also to recognize this. We shouldn't throw away the baby with the bathwater. You know, yes, there are challenges, but in Nigeria, regrettably, I keep saying this, many people perhaps say that, we do what is called self-flagellation. You know, at the slightest excuse, we condemn everything, we condemn ourselves, we condemn our country. We must recognize that we are making incremental positive changes in the electoral arena. It is not perfect. There are still many challenges that we have to work towards improving the integrity of the electoral process, but we have not reversed.
We've made progress.
We have made progress.
We've tried our best.
Yes, we may not be satisfied with the little progress that we have made, but we have made progress.
Are we overbeating ourselves about the
challenge? I think we are too impatient for the pace of change, particularly in electoral democracy. You know, things have been so bad for so long that many Nigerians no longer have the patience. We want to see change immediately, and change doesn't happen immediately like that. The challenge is to ensure that there is no reversal and to keep on improving, adding value. And if you ask me, in 2023, in many fundamental respects, we have added value thanks to the BVAS, also thanks to the new Electoral Act 2022. We have seen improvements. They may not have been to our satisfaction, but I have not seen any fundamental reversal. Where I have not seen any change is what I told you, the attitude and the mindset of many of our reckless politicians. That one, if it hasn't gotten worse, probably has remained the way it is, because these reckless politicians, what they do is to try to stay a step ahead of the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission will bring innovations to close some of the gaps that need to be improved upon, and the politicians struggle. The reckless politicians struggle to stay ahead, either through this. For example, you know, when they realized that the use of technology, whether it was card reader or now BVAS, is closing avenues through which they could use dead people on the register to cast votes, they could manipulate the process, you know, and the register to get people to fraudulently vote. What are they doing now? So now they are going to the polling, the citizens and the voters themselves to buy them directly. And as I mentioned, in 2023, it was so open in many... So blatantly. People will come, and all parties tried to do that.
So it was a competition of who had it was the highest bidder.
Highest bidder.
Of the conscience and the voting powers of the Nigerian citizens.
Exactly. And people who are relatively uninformed and illiterate, people who are in poverty, and the majority of the people on the register voters are women. And in some parts of this country, for many women, elections are the only opportunity. I regret to say this, but it's unfortunately true. And I have seen it in Kebbi, where I monitored the elections very, very closely. You know, women are the majority of voters. And many women, that is the first opportunity that they come out of Pada and are free to go almost the whole day for the elections. And for many of them, it is what they can get. Some of them can get 10,000, 20,000, even 5,000. That is more than many of them could get in a year from the little things that they do. So they commercialize the process, and so in many places, elections went to the highest bidder.
Prof, let's take a breather. And when we come back, there are those who are also worried that it does look like the power in our elections have moved from the ballot to the courtrooms. How bad is this? And it's growing every day because the number of court cases, the litigation after election, has slightly increased in the 2023 election. I'll be getting your view after this break. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Everyone, Professor Attahiru Jega is, interestingly, Professor Jega is from Jega.
That's right.
So a lot of people would not know that your village or town, isn't it? Is Jega too, isn't it?
Right.
He's the former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, and he's been speaking with us on our electoral process. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us tonight. And I was going to ask you the trend in our election now. There are those who are already reacting to some of the things that you said about the improvement in the process. There are those who say there's now a scenario, a phenomenon of writing results. So you allow people vote, but you go bypass the process, write the result, and get it uploaded. I mean, this is another danger that has emerged in our electoral process.
No, definitely, it's an issue of serious concern that the judiciary now seems to be the one who really get people into elected positions. And unfortunately, the image of the judiciary is also being impugned because of the many allegations of favoritism or to politicians or bribery and other things. So I think the judiciary needs to really begin to put its act together in order to address some of these challenges. No doubt, we cannot deepen and consolidate our democracy if the choice of the people is put aside and replaced by people who get into elective positions through judicial pronouncements. I think this, in fact, is one of the most serious issues that going forward we need to address. Because it started small, but now it's becoming a very, very big issue. From the celebrated cases relating to primary elections to even now, the cases that we are seeing with regards to the way and the manner judgments are given by tribunals. In some cases, even being upheld by courts, appellate courts. So this is a very, very serious issue which we have to address. And some of this probably can be addressed with further amendments to the Electoral Act and tightening the legal provisions with regards to the role of the judiciary. But you see, we have an excellent example in India, where over a period of time, since the 1950s, the judiciary tried to remain aloof, literally, from electoral litigations. And in fact, they started doing that while, of course, the Indian Electoral Commission was conducting good elections impartially, without partisanship. And so the judiciary started with a situation in which virtually every case that got to the court was decided in favor of the Electoral Commission. So over time, people now stop even taking cases. Once a pronouncement is made, then it is accepted, and you have to just prepare to contest again, rather than waste money and resources in litigation.
And belabor the judicial
exactly,
process,
yes. But in our own context, we have a lot to do in order to ensure that the judiciary is depoliticized, and also we have people of integrity who can act in accordance with the dictates of their conscience and in the true spirit of the law, rather than pandering to either some partisan interests or some monetary inducements.
I mean, there was the position of someone like Chidiodin Kalu, who described in a very strong language the error that the Court of Appeal said it made in the Kano case, where the last page of the judgment was totally different from the body of the judgment. And those who have already now said, look, this is a clear case of complicity of judges or the courts in manipulating the process, that it needs to, there's need for a thorough investigation into what is going on. But how do we get our judiciary far away from the electoral process? Well, it's the arbiter when anybody is aggrieved can run to. But then if it gets down that 500,000 people voted and all of those votes amount to nothing and it's now been determined by 3 or 4, 5 judges in the courtroom, how do we ensure that there is some reasonable sanity?
Yeah, excuse me. No doubt from what you have said and from this latest incidents regarding the case in Kano, it's very, very regrettable. It's unfortunate. In addition to Chidi Odunkalo, I have heard and read many distinguished lawyers in Nigeria really being disappointed and embarrassed with that kind of situation. You know, you would expect that courts, particularly at the appellate level, but in all cases, would be very meticulous, you know, and very careful about what they certify and issue as the judgments that they have made. But a situation in which what is issued, a written certified judgment, contradicts the pronouncements made in court while reading the judgment really is very, very unfortunate. So I agree, I'm not a lawyer, but from the political consequences that it has created, I definitely agree that there is need for a thorough investigation of that kind of thing. It may well turn out to be a simple error, but that error has now cast doubts and aspersion about the integrity of those who have issued that judgment. And it is in our own interest and in the interest of the integrity of our politics and even of the judiciary that an investigation gets to the bottom of what has happened. Maybe since the matter, I understand, will now be going to the Supreme Court, maybe some of these issues may come out there, you know. But whatever is the case, even if it is an error, there is need to identify who caused that error and for appropriate sanctions to be made so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, let's quickly try to wrap this up now. And I'd like to get, you talked about reforms, and I'd like to get 3 points quickly on the areas that critically need to be reformed in our electoral process. But I'd like to let you know also that politicians now write results. They know that they may not be able to bypass the beavers. So what they do is write the results, since the result sheet is sacrosanct, and they say go to court afterward. They write the result, they get it uploaded, and they certify the result in the hands of corrupt ad hoc officials and INEC staff. And that is the new trend in our elections. We've seen these allegations that have been brought up by politicians in the 3 elections that were conducted recently. How dangerous is this?
No, if it happens, as you said, and you said it, and I verily believe what you have said, it's a very dangerous thing to happen. And it also further illustrates the point I made earlier on about the capture of the process by very crooked politicians. You know, I mean, I will be interested to study and learn more of the details of how this thing happens, you know, but how can a written result now be uploaded, you know, onto the INEC portal or even the INEC server, because the portal is the public viewing point, the IREV, you know, but there is a server in which all the results of the election go, where it can't be tampered with. And what I believe that when the judiciary wants to know the true character of the voting pattern, where they can get that information, it's not the IREV. IREV is just to enable citizens
for transparency purposes,
to follow for transparency purposes.
The courts have established that.
Exactly. So frankly, we need to find out how they do this, and it's a very, very serious thing. In fact, it's one of the most dangerous ways of undermining the integrity of the electoral process.
No doubt, you mess up the electoral process, you mess up democracy.
Absolutely.
Our country is going to fall apart by itself. And the politicians need to be careful.
Yes.
We need to close quickly. And I'm going to give you a very difficult task in giving us about 3 reform areas that you think that we can fix in our election going forward, just in the 60 seconds. But let me ask you, good people must not run away from politics. Would you still be interested in running for president?
Well, I won't rule it out, but frankly, I have no intention, as we speak, to run in politics. But I agree with you, people should not sit on the fence or do sit-down look, because we have reached a critical point in the history of our country where all hands need to be on deck in order to bring desirable reforms and progress in terms of deepening our democracy. But people can contribute at several levels. For example, I've joined a political party, I'm contributing my own quota, so it is not necessarily in getting into an elective position that somebody can contribute constructively to politics. Yes.
So I'm being told that I don't have more than 10 seconds more. But if there is a final word that you need to tell us tonight about reforms, what would that be?
I would say that the Electoral Act 2022 is a good law, but there are ambiguities in it, there are challenges, and there are areas of improvement. I would recommend that the National Assembly, particularly, should commence a process immediately in order to have a more improved legal framework for our elections in good time before the 2027 elections. Secondly, in particular, we need to pay attention to the way and the manner by which people are appointed into the Independent National Electoral Commission. In fact, we need to re-examine the recommendation of the Justice Uwe's Electoral Reform Committee, which has recommended a totally different way, rather than just the president nominating, but a process where you can avoid this situation in which Nigerians believe that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So we need to change that, because changing perception can go a long way in adding integrity to our process.
Prof, such a pleasure having you tonight.
Thank you,
and I
Sean.
most sincerely thank you for those truth and those frank talk about our electoral process. Thank you so much.
Thank you
It's an
so
honor
much.
having you tonight on the program.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you
Sean.
so much.
All
indeed.
the best.
That's our program tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimaloe. Bye-bye.